I'm Mason, I'm 32, and I had to make a choice that ended with my own family in handcuffs on our living room floor. Before I tell you how my decision led to my brother's incarceration, my parents' bankruptcy, and a letter that finally explained everything, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It helps to know I'm not just talking into the void. It all came down to a single crystal clear moment. A moment that plays over and over in my head like a security tape on a loop. I'm standing in the arched doorway of my parents' living room. The air smells like my mom's lemon polish and burnt coffee. It's a familiar, comfortable smell that suddenly feels like a lie. My mother, Eleanor, is holding a manila folder. Not just any folder. It has a bright red border and bold block letters across the top. Top secret/SCI. She's smiling, a gentle, dismissive wave of her hand as she passes it to my younger brother, Leo. Just sharing your brother's boring government work, she says, her voice light and airy. Nothing important here. Leo, my golden boy brother, takes it with a smirk. He's the VP of a marketing firm, the son who makes sense at dinner parties. He flips through a page, his eyes glazing over with performative boredom. My father, Richard, leans over his shoulder. He's a man who believes anything he can't physically build or sell is a waste of time. He points at a satellite image, a faint trace of interest in his eyes. "What's all this, then?" he murmurs, scanning a threat assessment memo. My heart isn't pounding. It's not racing. It's gone completely still, like a stone at the bottom of a frozen lake. The world narrows to the rustle of that paper, the classified paper that I am sworn to protect with my life. My throat is tight, filled with words I can't say. Words like felony, espionage, treason. They don't see me. I'm just a shadow in the doorway. My hand, steady as a surgeon's, slips into my pocket. My fingers find the smooth, cool glass of my phone. I don't look down. I don't need to. My thumb knows the exact spot on the screen. A small, discreet icon for a security app. I press it. A tiny vibration confirms the signal is sent. A silent alarm that just screamed across a secure federal network. There's no turning back. Response teams are already on their way. They won't knock. They won't ask questions. They will breach all entrances. And my family, my smiling, oblivious family, has no idea that their world is about to be ripped apart. And I was the one who lit the fuse. To understand how a family get-together turned into a federal raid, we have to go back 6 weeks. Back to when I still believed a locked door was enough to keep my two worlds from colliding. My life exists in a place called a SCIF. Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility. It sounds fancy, but really, it's just a windowless box of a room where secrets live and die. For 6 years, this box inside the Department of Homeland Security has been my world. My title is Senior Intelligence Analyst, which is a bureaucratic way of saying I stare at patterns until the whispers of a threat become a scream. The work is a grind. It's not car chases and cool gadgets like in the movies. It's thousands of hours staring at encrypted data streams, satellite imagery, and informant chatter, looking for the one signal in the noise. It's the weight of knowing that if you miss something, one tiny, insignificant detail, people could die. Hundreds of them. My only real confidant in that world is Dr. Anya Sharma. She's a decade older than me, sharp as a razor, with eyes that have seen too much. We share a silent understanding. We don't talk about our weekends. We talk about threat matrices and asset vulnerabilities. One afternoon, hunched over a terminal displaying the first fragments of what would become Operation Keystone, she looked at me, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. "This one feels different, Mason," she'd said, her voice barely a whisper. "This one feels close to home." She was right. It's hard to explain that kind of pressure to people who live outside the box. It's a vow of silence that you take, not just for your career, but for your life. I remember the day I was sworn in. I was 26, fresh out of grad school, my suit feeling 2 sizes too big. I stood in a sterile government office, raised my right hand, and swore an oath. It wasn't just to the Constitution. It was an oath to protect the secrets, to put the security of the nation above all else. Above friends, above family, above myself. The words felt huge in my mouth, heavy with a significance I couldn't fully grasp then. But I felt the shift. It was like a door closing behind me, sealing me off from a simpler life. I chose this. I wanted the responsibility. I wanted to do something that mattered, something with real stakes. I just never imagined those stakes would involve the people I loved most. My family never understood. To them, my job was an inconvenience, a source of annoying secrecy. They saw the locked briefcase, the encrypted phone, the vague answers about my day, and they didn't see patriotism. They saw arrogance. They saw me choosing a world they weren't allowed into, and they resented me for it. That was the baggage I carried home with me 6 weeks before the raid. For my father's 62nd birthday, I was heading into the lion's den, armed with a polite smile and a briefcase full of secrets they were dying to mock. I just didn't know they were also willing to break the law to get a peek inside. That visit was when the first cracks in our foundation really began to show. The party for my dad's birthday was exactly as I'd expected. My brother Leo held court by the fireplace, telling some loud, charming story about a marketing deal he'd closed. People laughed. My dad clapped him on the back, beaming with a pride that was so public, so easy. My sister, Isabel, a successful pediatrician, was trying to manage her 2 kids while simultaneously looking exhausted and resentful that I wasn't helping more. "So, save any kittens from trees today, Mason?" Leo asked later, cornering me by the drinks table. He handed me a beer with a condescending smile. "Something like that," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Come on, man. Just once, tell us something real. Did you spend all day stamping classified on things? Is that what you do?" "I can't talk about it, Leo. You know that." Right. Mr. Big Shot Secret Agent," he said, turning to his wife, Chloe. "He can't talk about his big, important government job. Probably because it's so boring he'd put us all to sleep. It was the same routine every single visit. 1,000 tiny cuts. My mom was the worst. She saw my boundaries not as professional necessities, but as a personal rejection of her. "Mason, honey," she said, pulling me aside into the kitchen. "Your Aunt Carol is asking what you do. Just give me something to tell her. She thinks you're in the CIA. Mom, just tell her I'm a government analyst. That's it. It's the truth." "But it's so bland," she complained, wringing her hands on her apron. "Your brother closes million-dollar deals. Your sister saves children's lives. And you analyze. It doesn't sound like you're using your potential." That night, it came to a head at the dinner table. My dad, a few glasses of wine in, decided to solve the Mason problem once and for all. "You know, son," he started, his voice a little too loud. "All this secrecy, it's not healthy. We're your family. What's the harm in telling us a little bit about your day? We're not going to tell anyone." I put my fork down. "Dad, it's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of federal law. I took an oath." "Oh, an oath," he scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "It's just paperwork, Mason. We're talking about your life. You come home, you lock yourself away. It's like you don't want to be part of this family anymore." My jaw tightened. I looked around the table. My mother was nodding in agreement. Leo was smirking into his wine glass. Isabel wouldn't even look at me. They saw it as a choice. Me versus them. They couldn't comprehend a responsibility that was bigger than their feelings. "That's not fair," I said, my voice low. "I'm here, aren't I? Are you?" My father shot back. "Or is just your body here, while your head is off in some secret bunker playing spy games? Don't pretend you're saving the world, son. You're a guy who pushes paper for a living." The table fell silent. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. I didn't have a response. How could I explain the weight of what I did to people who refused to believe it was real? I just picked up my fork and pushed the food around my plate, the silence screaming louder than any argument could. That was the moment I should have packed my bags and left. But I stayed, because despite everything, they were still my family. And that loyalty would end up costing us everything. I had planned to stay for the long weekend, a painful but necessary family obligation. But 2 days after the birthday dinner, my secure phone buzzed with a priority notification. It was my boss, Director Evans. His voice was clipped, all business. "Mason, we have a development in Keystone," he said, no preamble. "A credible asset just confirmed a timeline. It's accelerated. I need you on it now." "I'm at my parents' place, sir. For hours away." "Doesn't matter," he said. "The network is live. I need your eyes on this data stream now." This just became the agency's #1 priority. The line went dead. My stomach dropped. An accelerated timeline meant the threat was no longer theoretical. It was real, and it was coming soon. I went upstairs to my old childhood bedroom and began the lockdown protocol. I used a portable device to sweep for bugs, then connected my encrypted laptop to a dedicated, secure satellite link. The door had a simple lock, but for an extra layer, I wedged a chair under the knob. My family, of course, was furious. "You're going to work? Now?" My mother demanded through the door. "We had a barbecue planned." "I'm sorry, Mom. This is an emergency. I can't be disturbed. At all." "This is ridiculous, Mason," my father yelled from downstairs. "You're being incredibly disrespectful." I ignored them, my focus already 1,000 miles away, lost in lines of code and intercepted communications. For the next few hours, the world outside that room ceased to exist. Later that afternoon, my Aunt Carol came over. I could hear her voice drifting up from the kitchen, syrupy sweet and laced with poison. "Oh, Eleanor, don't feel bad," she was saying. "Mason has always been like this, so secretive. He always thought he was a little bit better, a little more important than the rest of us." That was all the encouragement my mother needed. But the real damage came from my sister, Isabel. I heard her join the conversation, her voice tight with years of perceived slights. "I just don't get why he has to be so dramatic about it," Isabel complained. "Locking the door like we're all a bunch of spies. It's insulting." My mother sighed. "I know, dear. I wish I could just make him see sense." And then came the fateful words, the ones that sealed our fate. "It's not like the lock even matters," Isabel said with a bitter little laugh. "I mean, it's the same old door from when we were kids. Don't you still keep that rusty old spare key in the back of the junk drawer in the kitchen?" Silence. A thick, heavy silence. From inside my room, I couldn't see my mother's eyes light up. I couldn't see the dangerous idea taking root in her mind. I was too busy trying to save strangers, completely unaware that the biggest threat to my mission wasn't a terrorist cell. It was my own family, armed with a little bit of resentment and a rusty old key. For 6 straight hours, I didn't move. My world was the glowing screen of the laptop, the quiet hum of the satellite modem, and the chilling data scrolling before my eyes. Operation Keystone wasn't just chatter anymore. It was a fully formed plot. Names, locations, supply chains. A domestic terror cell was planning a coordinated attack on the public transit systems of 3 major cities. The timeline was horrifyingly close. My job was to connect the dots, to find the linchpin that would allow us to dismantle the network before they could strike. My eyes burned. My back ached. The coffee I'd made hours ago was a cold, bitter sludge in the mug beside me. My brain felt like it was overheating, buzzing with a mixture of caffeine, adrenaline, and sheer exhaustion. I knew I was hitting a wall. Staring at the screen any longer would just lead to mistakes, and a mistake on this project could mean a death toll in the hundreds, maybe thousands. I needed air. I needed to move. Just 30 minutes to clear my head and come back with fresh eyes. It was a standard procedure for analysts working on high-stress, long-duration tasks. Step away to maintain focus. Before I left, I ran through my security checklist with practiced precision. The laptop screen was locked, requiring a complex password and a biometric thumbprint scan to open. All physical documents, every last page of the Keystone file, were secured inside my briefcase. It wasn't just any briefcase. It was a hardened, tamper-evident case with a dual combination lock. I spun the dials, heard the satisfying click as the tumblers fell into place. Finally, the door. I removed the chair from under the knob and turned the lock. It was a flimsy, residential-grade lock, I knew that. But behind it, in their minds, was the full weight of the United States government. They wouldn't dare, I thought. My frustration with them was real, but deep down, I still believed in a fundamental line of respect, of family loyalty. I believed they were annoyed, not malicious. I believed they were ignorant, not reckless. That was my mistake. I underestimated their sense of entitlement. I underestimated my mother's belief that her role as matriarch gave her a security clearance higher than the president's. I went downstairs, avoiding eye contact. Going for a quick walk, I mumbled to my dad, who was watching TV. He just grunted in response. The crisp autumn air was a shock to my system. I walked down the quiet suburban street, the crunch of leaves under my feet a welcome distraction. For a few precious minutes, I let the tension drain from my shoulders. I focused on the setting sun, the cool breeze, the feeling of being in the normal world again. I let my guard down. I told myself that everything was secure, that my worlds were separated by a locked door and a hardened briefcase. I trusted in the locks. I trusted in the law. But I forgot that in a family home, the most dangerous threats aren't always the ones you prepare for. They're the ones who have a key. I left behind a locked room, but to my family, I had left behind a challenge. A forbidden treasure chest just begging to be opened. And they were about to take the bait. The moment the front door clicked shut behind me, the atmosphere in the house shifted. It was as if my departure had created a vacuum of authority, and my mother was more than ready to fill it. "He thinks he can just lock us out," Eleanor said, her voice a low murmur from the kitchen. She was talking to my dad and Leo, who had gathered like conspirators. "In my own house, it's just so disrespectful." Aunt Carol, who was still there, fanned the flames. "Well, you are the mother of the house, Eleanor. A mother has a right to know what's going on under her roof." That was all it took. That little push. My mother's face hardened with a sense of righteous purpose. "Isabel was right," she said, her voice gaining strength. She marched over to the junk drawer, the one by the phone that held a tangled mess of rubber bands, old batteries, and forgotten receipts. She rummaged for a moment, and then her hand emerged, holding a small, tarnished brass key. "Mom, what are you doing?" Leo asked, a thrill of excitement in his voice. He wasn't trying to stop her. He was egging her on. "I'm going to see what's so important that my son has to treat his own family like criminals," she declared. My father, who should have been the voice of reason, just shrugged. "Go on then. Probably just a bunch of spreadsheets. Let's see what all the fuss is about." The three of them went upstairs, a little parade of defiance. My mother slid the key into the lock. It was stiff from years of disuse, but with a hard turn, there was a loud, grating click. The door swung open. The room was quiet, the only light coming from the blinking status indicator on the satellite modem. It felt like a sacred space, a bubble of intense, classified work. And they had just popped it. They saw the briefcase on the desk. It looked serious, official. That only made it more enticing. "Well, I'll be," Richard said, running a hand over the hardened shell. "Looks like something out of a James Bond movie." "What do you think the combination is?" Leo asked, fiddling with the dials. My mother, however, had a simpler approach. "Mason always was sentimental," she said. She walked over to the desk and picked up the framed photo of our old dog, Buster, who had died years ago. Taped to the back was a small piece of paper. On it were 2 sets of numbers. The combinations. A backup I had foolishly put there years ago for a different lock and forgotten about. She read the numbers aloud. Leo spun the dials. The latches on the briefcase sprang open with a soft metallic sigh. Inside, nestled in custom foam, lay the files for Operation Keystone. The red top secret stamp seemed to glow in the dim light. They didn't hesitate. My father lifted the thick stack of papers from the case. "Let's take these downstairs," my mother said, her voice giddy with her victory. "I'll put on a fresh pot of coffee." And just like that, they carried a federal crime down the stairs and into the living room, treating a matter of national security like the Sunday crossword puzzle. The trespass wasn't just entering my room. It was the complete and utter violation of everything I was Everything I stood for, carried out by the people who were supposed to be on my side. Down in the living room, the scene took on a surreal, almost darkly comical quality. My dad had put on his reading glasses and was poring over a technical schematic of a public transit hub. My mom was flipping through personnel files, tut-tutang as if she were judging a local bake-off. "Goodness, these people all look so serious," she commented. Leo, however, was bored. This wasn't the exciting cloak and dagger stuff he'd imagined. It was just data, charts, graphs, lines of code. It was exactly the kind of boring paperwork he'd always accused me of doing. His ego felt bruised. He needed to reassert his superiority. "See, this is what I'm talking about," he announced, tossing a sheet of signal intelligence analysis onto the coffee table. "It's meaningless jargon. My intern could design a better data visualization than this." He pulled out his sleek, top-of-the-line smartphone. "I've got to send this to Mark at the office. He works in tech security. He'll get a kick out of how antiquated this government garbage is." Chloe, Leo's wife, who had been watching the entire spectacle with a growing sense of unease, finally spoke up. "Leo, I don't think that's a good idea," she said, her voice quiet and nervous. "Oh, relax, honey," Leo said, waving her off without even looking at her. "It's not like I'm sending it to the Russians. It's just a joke." He aimed his phone's camera at one of the most sensitive pages in the entire file. A network diagram that showed the known and suspected locations of every member of the terror cell, along with their communication methods. It was the Rosetta Stone of the entire operation, the key to taking them all down at once. He tapped the screen. The camera flashed. The image was crisp and clear on his phone's high-resolution display. A perfect digital copy of a document so secret that even most of the DHS directorate wasn't cleared to see it. He started typing a message to his friend, his thumbs flying across the screen. "Check out the crap my secret agent brother is working on. Looks like it was designed in 1995. LOL. Chloe stared at him, her face pale. She was the only one in the room who seemed to grasp that a line had been crossed, a point of no return. But she was intimidated by Leo, by the whole family. She bit her lip and said nothing. That photograph was the tipping point. The previous actions, entering the room, opening the case, reading the files, were felonies born of ignorance and arrogance. But this, digitizing a top-secret document with the intent to transmit it, even as a joke, was a different level of crime. It was the kind of action that ends careers, destroys lives, and, if the file got into the wrong hands, gets people killed. Leo held the phone in his hand, a smug look on his face, completely oblivious. He was holding a bomb, and he thought it was a toy, and I was just minutes away from walking back in the door. I had no idea that I wasn't just coming back to a family argument. I was walking into an active crime scene. The 30-minute walk had worked. The tension in my neck and shoulders had eased, and the cool air had cleared the fog from my brain. I felt ready to go back to the screen, to find the final piece of the puzzle. As I walked up the driveway, I felt a small, fleeting sense of gratitude for my family. For all their annoyances, this was still home. The thought turned to ash in my mouth the moment I stepped inside. The house was quiet, too quiet. Usually, at this time of day, the TV would be on, my dad's game show blaring. Or my mom would be in the kitchen clattering pots and pans. But there was nothing. Just a heavy, expectant silence that made the hair on my arms stand up. My training kicked in. It's an instinct honed by years of looking for things that are out of place. The quiet was wrong. It was a deviation from the baseline. I moved silently through the entryway and towards the living room. The door was ajar, just a crack. I could see a sliver of the room inside, illuminated by the warm glow of a lamp. Then I saw the light flicker. It wasn't the lamp. It was a small, blue-white light, the kind from a phone screen. I heard a muffled whisper. It was Leo's voice. Then my mom's. A soft "H." My stomach went cold. They were in the living room, whispering, looking at a phone. Why would they be hiding? Unless they were looking at something they shouldn't be. My heart, which had been so still in that moment of decision later, started a slow, heavy drumbeat in my chest. Thump, thump, thump. It was the sound of dread. I took a slow, deliberate breath, my hand already moving towards my pocket. My mind was racing, connecting the dots. The quiet house, the whispers, the spare key Isabel had mentioned. It all clicked into place with a horrifying certainty. I didn't want to be right. I prayed I was wrong, that I was just being paranoid from the stress of the job. I hoped I would push open that door and find them looking at embarrassing old family photos, or planning a surprise for me. Any other secret but mine. But I knew. The same instinct that helped me find terrorists in mountains of data was telling me now that the enemy was not thousands of miles away. They were just on the other side of this door. I put my hand on the cool wood of the living room door. I braced myself. The silence before the storm was over. It was time for the hurricane to make landfall, right in the heart of my family's home. I pushed the door open. The scene that greeted me was worse than I could have imagined. They weren't just looking at the files. The files were spread across the coffee table like a picnic blanket. My father was holding a page. My mother was leaning over his shoulder. And Leo was holding his phone, the screen glowing with the picture he had just taken. My picture. My classified, nation-saving, career-ending picture. They all looked up at once, their faces a mixture of guilt and defiance, like children caught with their hands in the cookie jar. For a second, nobody spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. My voice, when it came, was not my own. It was a cold, flat thing I didn't recognize. "What are you doing?" My mother was the first to recover. She tried to smile, a weak, trembling thing. "Oh, Mason, you're back. We were just taking a little look, to understand your work better." "A little look?" I repeated, my gaze sweeping over the catastrophic mess of top-secret documents. I pointed at the folder. "That is property of the United States government. It is classified information that you are not authorized to see." My father took off his glasses and stood up, trying to assert his parental authority. "Now hold on, son. Don't take that tone with your mother. It's not a big deal. We're family." "It is a big deal." My voice finally cracked, the raw emotion breaking through the ice. "This is a federal offense. Every single one of you has just committed a felony." Leo scoffed, lowering his phone but not putting it away. "Oh, here we go. Don't be so dramatic, Mason. It's just some work stuff. Nobody's going to find out." And then I saw it. The casual way he held his phone. The smug look in his eyes. He wasn't just looking. He was sharing. My eyes locked onto the screen of his phone, and I saw the image of the network diagram. I saw the text message field beneath it. Everything went silent in my head. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal. It all vanished, replaced by a singular, ice-cold clarity. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a security breach, critical one. My brother, in his arrogant ignorance, was about to broadcast the blueprint of a multi-million-dollar counterterrorism operation to a civilian. Who knew where it could go from there? This was the point of no return. My duty and my blood were at war, and there was no compromise. There was only the oath. "You have no idea what you've done," I said, my voice barely a whisper. My hand was already in my pocket, my thumb hovering over the alert icon. "What we've done?" my mother cried, her voice rising. "What about what you've done? Hiding your life from us, treating us like strangers." I looked at her, at my father, at my brother, the people I loved, the people who had just betrayed everything I stood for. And I made my choice. I pressed the button. For about 3 minutes, nothing happened. The world held its breath. My family started to relax, mistaking my silence for defeat. Leo even smirked, pocketing his phone as if to say, "See? Nothing happened." They thought the drama was over. They thought they had won. They were wrong. The first sign was a faint, rhythmic thump-thump-thump from the distance, growing rapidly louder. A helicopter. Then, from all directions at once, came the sound of splintering wood and shattering glass. The front door didn't just open. It exploded inward, ripped from its hinges. The large bay window in the living room imploded, sending shards of glass flying across the room. Before they could even scream, the room was full of men. Big men, dressed in black tactical gear from head to toe, helmets with visors obscuring their faces. They carried short-barreled rifles held in a low, ready position. Red laser dots danced across my father's chest, my mother's terrified face. Federal agents, get on the ground. Now! The voice was like a bullhorn, a disembodied shout that tolerated no argument. My family froze, paralyzed with shock and disbelief. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening in their safe, suburban living room. On the ground! The voice roared again. This time they moved. My father, his face ashen, stumbled to his knees. My mother let out a strangled sob and collapsed onto the rug, next to the scattered top-secret files. Leo, the cocky marketing VP, was suddenly very small. He dropped to the floor, his hands automatically going up to shield his head. The team moved with brutal efficiency. They were a machine. One agent kicked the phone out of Leo's reach, while another cuffed his hands behind his back with a sharp zip of a plastic tie. Another did the same to my father. The team leader, a man I would later know as Agent Davies, pulled my mother's arms behind her and secured her wrists. Chloe, Leo's wife, was sobbing hysterically in a corner, an agent standing over her, his rifle pointed at the floor. Throughout it all, I stood by the doorway, unmoving. The agents didn't touch me. They knew who I was. Their eyes swept past me as if I were part of the furniture. To them, I was the asset. My family was the threat. Living room secure, someone yelled. All hostiles contained. Another voice confirmed. Hostiles. They called my parents hostiles. The word echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of the room. My mother looked at me from the floor, her eyes wide with a terror and a betrayal so profound it would haunt me forever. She didn't understand. How could her son, her Mason, let this happen? Another team of agents in polo shirts and vests swarmed the room. The evidence collection team. They moved with a different kind of purpose, armed with cameras and evidence bags. They started with the phone, placing it carefully into an anti-static bag. Then they methodically collected every single page of the Keystone file that was scattered on the floor and coffee table. Nothing was missed. The home I grew up in had been transformed into a federal crime scene. The air no longer smelled of lemon polish. It smelled of gunpowder, sweat, and the cold, metallic scent of the law. My family was on the floor in cuffs, and it was my finger that had pulled the trigger. The tactical team cleared out, replaced by a quiet, suffocating tension. My family was allowed to sit on the couch, their wrists still bound. They looked broken, shell-shocked. A few minutes later, a man in a crisp, dark suit walked through the ruined doorway. It was Director Evans. His face was grim, his eyes holding a disappointment so deep it felt like a physical force. He nodded once at me, then turned his attention to my family. My mother found her voice first, a desperate, pleading wail. Director, please, this is all a misunderstanding. We're his family. We were just curious. Curious, Evans repeated, his voice dangerously soft. He picked up one of the evidence bags, holding the phone inside it between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a dead insect. Your son took a photograph of a classified document. He was about to send it to a friend as a joke. Do you have any idea what you have done? It was just some boring work stuff. My father blurted out, his voice shaking. Some government papers. We didn't hurt anyone. That was when Evans's composure finally broke. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice dropped to an icy, lethal whisper that cut through the room like a shard of glass. Boring work stuff? He said, taking a step closer to them. He knelt down so he was at eye level with my father. Let me tell you what was in those boring documents, Mr. Mitchell. The file you were casually passing around your living room is codenamed Operation Keystone. It contains the identities of undercover agents, the locations of surveillance posts, and the operational plan to dismantle a domestic terror network. He paused, letting the words sink in. My mother stopped crying. My father's face went slack. Evans continued, his voice relentless. That network was, and is, in the final stages of planning a coordinated bombing attack on the public transit systems of 3 major American cities. The attacks were scheduled for next week. Not in a movie. Not on TV. In the real world. The work your son was doing in that room upstairs was about to stop that from happening. He stood up and looked at Leo, whose face had turned a sickly shade of green. That photograph you took? The one you were about to text to your buddy? It was a detailed map of the cell's command structure. If that image had left this house, if it had found its way onto the open internet, the entire operation would have been compromised. Our agents would have been exposed and likely executed. The attacks would have gone forward. Hundreds of innocent people, men, women, children, would have been killed. Not hypothetically, they would have died. The room was utterly silent. The truth of his words landed with the force of a physical blow. The color drained from my mother's face. My father looked like he was going to be sick. Leo was staring at his cuffed hands as if he'd never seen them before. The arrogance, the excuses, the self-pity. It all evaporated, replaced by a dawning, soul-crushing horror. They finally understood. They hadn't just broken a rule. They hadn't just disrespected my career. They had casually, carelessly, almost destroyed countless lives. They had almost become monsters. Evans looked from their shattered faces to me, standing alone by the door. His expression softened for a fraction of a second. "Your son didn't call us," he said. His voice now directed at them but meant for me. "He activated a security protocol. He did his duty. He upheld his oath." He turned and walked towards the door, his job done. "Take them downtown for processing," he said to the agents by the door. And as my family was led away, dazed and broken, I was left standing in the ruins of my childhood home, the weight of his words crashing down on me. I had done my duty, and it had cost me everything. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally had to draw a line between my duty and my family. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're awesome. If you would, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you've been on this journey with me. It not only helps more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and sterile interrogation rooms. My family was released on bail, but the storm was far from over. I was put on administrative leave, a standard procedure, and had to endure my own series of intense internal reviews. They needed to be sure I wasn't complicit. My colleague, Markham, the one who always saw me as a rival, seemed to enjoy my predicament, making snide remarks about bringing your work home with you. But my situation was temporary. Theirs was catastrophic. They hired a lawyer, a Mr. Henderson, a tired-looking man with a briefcase full of bad news. The federal prosecutor was not interested in excuses about family curiosity. The evidence was irrefutable. Leo's phone contained the photograph. Their fingerprints were all over the classified documents. They were facing serious prison time. The government wanted to make an example of them. Ultimately, Mr. Henderson managed to negotiate a plea deal for my parents. Given their age and clean records, they avoided prison. The price was pleading guilty to a felony charge of unlawful possession of classified information. They received 2 years of probation and a fine of $50,000 each. $100,000. It was their entire retirement savings. Their nest egg, gone. Any plans they had for a comfortable future were wiped out. Any inheritance they planned to leave was gone, swallowed by legal fees and federal fines. Leo wasn't so lucky. Taking the photograph and preparing to transmit it was a much more serious offense. He was charged with unauthorized removal and retention of classified material. His high-powered corporate lawyer fought it, but there was no defense. He was sentenced to 18 months in a federal minimum security prison. The news shattered what was left of our family. Leo's marketing firm fired him, citing a morals clause in his contract. His career was over. His wife, Chloe, shaken to her core by the raid and the public humiliation, filed for divorce. She wanted no part of our family's radioactive fallout. She told the lawyer she was concerned for her safety and future. I paid the initial retainer for Mr. Henderson's services out of my own savings. It was a significant chunk of my salary, but I felt a twisted sense of responsibility. I did it quietly through a wire transfer. They never knew it was me. They probably assumed it just came out of their own accounts before they were frozen. It wasn't forgiveness. It was, I don't know what it was. A final act of a son, maybe. It didn't matter. Changed nothing. The day before Leo was due to report to prison, Mr. Henderson arranged one final meeting in his stuffy office. It wasn't a meeting for legal strategy. It was a meeting to sign the final papers, the official acknowledgement of their ruin. The four of us, me, my parents, and Isabel, were there. Leo wasn't. He refused to be in the same room as me. The silence was thick enough to choke on. My parents looked 10 years older, their faces etched with lines of stress and shame. Isabel, however, was not broken. She was furious. Her grief had curdled into a white-hot rage, and it was all directed at me. As my father signed the last document with a trembling hand, Isabel finally exploded. "Are you happy now?" She hissed across the mahogany table, her eyes blazing with hatred. "Is this what you wanted?" I looked at her, my voice weary. "Izzy, this isn't what anyone wanted. Don't you Izzy me!" she screamed, standing up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You did this. You destroyed us. For what? For your stupid secret job? We're your family. Leo is going to prison because of you. Mom and Dad have lost everything. Their retirement, their house, everything they worked for. I hope your precious promotion was worth it." My mother started to cry, soft, hopeless sobs. My father just stared at the table, a completely defeated man. I stood up to face my sister. I felt a profound, aching sadness, but no guilt. "I didn't send Leo to prison," I said, my voice steady and quiet. "His actions sent him to prison. Mom and Dad's actions cost them their savings. They broke the law, a serious law. There are consequences for that." "Consequences?" She laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "The only one who hasn't faced any consequences is you. You'll go back to your important job, and you'll leave us here to pick up the pieces of the lives you shattered." "I have to live with this too," I said. "Oh, please. You get to be the hero. We just get to be the villains in your story." She was right, in a way. That's how the world would see it. I looked at my parents. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My father looked up at me, his face a blank mask of exhaustion. "I don't know who you are anymore, Mason," he said, his voice hollow. "I really don't." There was nothing left to say. The chasm between us was too wide to cross. They had chosen their narrative. I was the betrayer. I was the monster who had sacrificed his family for his career. "I did my job," I said to the room, to the ghosts of our past. "I kept my oath. I'm sorry it ended this way, but I am not sorry for doing the right thing." I turned and walked out of the lawyer's office, leaving them behind. The door clicked shut, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I had just lost my family forever. A year passed. Life, as it does, moved on. At work, the aftermath of the breach was a strange mixture of suspicion and respect. Markham and a few others looked at me sideways, whispering about the guy whose own family were federal criminals. But the people who mattered, like Director Evans and Anya Sharma, treated me with a quiet, profound understanding. I was cleared by the internal review and reinstated. My role in preventing the Keystone attacks, despite the personal cost, had not gone unnoticed. 6 months after the incident, Director Evans called me into his office. The big glass window overlooked the city, a city that was still blissfully unaware of how close it had come to tragedy. "The last of the Keystone network was neutralized this morning," he said, his voice tired but satisfied. 47 arrests, nationwide. 0 casualties. They were planning to use a chemical agent in the subway tunnels. The death toll would have been catastrophic. He looked at me. "Your work, your choice that day, Mason, it wasn't just about protecting assets. It was about protecting people. You saved hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. The president sends his personal thanks. It should have been a moment of triumph. And in a professional sense, it was. A few months later, I received a significant promotion. I was made head of a new domestic counterterrorism task force. It came with a hefty salary increase and immense responsibility. I was good at my job. I was successful. But my life outside the office was a barren wasteland. I lived in a new, sterile apartment closer to headquarters. It was clean, quiet, and empty. The silence was deafening. There were no more angry phone calls from my parents, no more baiting texts from Leo. There was just nothing. I had been excised from the family narrative. I was a ghost. My sister Isabel made sure of that. About a month after my promotion was announced internally, I received an email from her. It was the first communication I'd had from any of them in almost a year. The subject line was just one word: congratulations. The body of the email was short and brutal. I heard about your big promotion. I hope it was worth it. Mom had to sell her wedding ring last week to help pay the property taxes. Dad's health is failing. Leo spends his days in a cage. You have your career, your success, your secret world. But you have no one. You lost your family. I hope, for your sake, that one day you realize the price you paid was far too high. Don't ever contact us again. I read the email 3 times, the words burning into my screen. I imagined her typing it, her fingers hitting the keys with angry, stabbing motions. She probably felt vindicated, like she had finally landed a blow that would hurt me. And it did hurt. It hurt more than I could ever admit. I closed the laptop. I walked over to my own window, which looked out on the anonymous, blinking lights of the city. Hundreds of thousands of people down there, living their lives, completely safe, completely oblivious. I had chosen them over my family. I had traded the warmth of a home for the cold satisfaction of duty. And standing there, in the silence of my empty apartment, I had to face the terrible, lonely truth. I would make the same choice again, every single time. Another 6 months crawled by. The silence from my family was absolute. I had accepted it as my new reality. Then, an envelope arrived at my apartment. It was thin, cheap, with a postmark from a federal correctional facility. My hands trembled slightly as I saw the return address. It was from Leo. I almost threw it away. Part of me didn't want to know what was inside. More blame? More hatred? But I couldn't. I opened it. The letter was written on thin, lined paper, his usually confident handwriting now small and cramped. It wasn't what I expected. Mason, it began. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because there's nothing but time to think in here. My cellmate is a guy named Peters. He's an ex-State Department guy. He's in for espionage. He sold secrets for money. He told me stories. Not bragging stories, but sad ones. He told me about an asset, a foreign national helping the U.S., who was caught because of a leak. He told me what they did to him and his family, his wife, his kids. It wasn't quick. He talks a lot about how one little piece of information, in the wrong hands, can unravel a whole world and get people killed in ways you can't imagine. He doesn't know my story. He just talks. For the first year I was here, I hated you. I blamed you for everything. For my prison sentence, my ruined career, for Chloe filing for divorce, for all of it. But listening to Peters, I finally get it. I keep thinking about that picture on my phone. I think about what could have happened if I'd hit send. I think about the people Director Evans talked about. I see their faces when I try to sleep. You didn't ruin my life, Mason. I did. I was an arrogant, stupid fool who couldn't stand that my brother was doing something important. Something I couldn't understand. You weren't trying to punish me. You were doing your job. You were stopping me from becoming a monster. I don't know if we can ever be brothers again. I don't know if Mom and Dad will ever forgive you. But I wanted to say I'm sorry. And thank you, Leo. I read the letter again and then a third time. A single tear tracked down my cheek and fell onto the cheap paper, smudging the ink. It wasn't a full pardon. It wasn't a happy ending. But it was a flicker of light in a very dark place. It was understanding. It was remorse. It was the beginning of a long road back. Buoyed by this, I made a difficult choice. I drove to my parents' new, much smaller house, the one they had to downsize to after the fines. I needed to see them. My mother answered the door. She looked frail, her face a web of weary lines. When she saw me, her expression didn't change. It remained flat, empty. "What do you want, Mason?" she asked, her voice devoid of emotion. I wanted to see how you were," I said lamely. "We're fine," she said, though the state of the peeling paint on the doorframe told a different story. "We're managing." My father appeared behind her. He leaned heavily on a cane. He just stared at me, his eyes cold. "You should go," he said. "There was no bridge to be built here. Not today." Leo's letter was a whisper of hope, but the ashes of my parents' forgiveness were cold. Some wounds, I realized, don't heal. Some fires burn so hot they consume everything, leaving nothing behind but scarred earth. I nodded, turned, and walked back to my car, the gulf between us wider and more silent than ever. 2 years after the raid, I found myself standing in a formal, wood-paneled office deep within a secure government building. The room was quiet, occupied by only a handful of the nation's top intelligence officials. Director Evans stood beside a large desk, holding a small, velvet-lined box. This was my awards ceremony. There was no audience, no applause, no news cameras. My heroism, as they called it, had to remain a secret, buried in the same classified files it had protected. Director Evans cleared his throat and read from a citation. He spoke of extraordinary integrity, courage in the face of immense personal conflict, and actions that directly resulted in the preservation of national security and the saving of countless American lives. He opened the box. Inside, resting on the dark velvet, was the Intelligence Community Medal for Distinguished Service. It was one of the highest honors an analyst could receive. He pinned it to my suit jacket. The medal felt heavy on my chest, felt like an anchor. He shook my hand firmly. "The country owes you a debt it can never repay, Mason," he said, his voice low and sincere. I just nodded, unable to speak. I thought about the irony of it all. I had a medal I could never show anyone, for a victory I could never speak about. It was a symbol of the greatest achievement of my professional life and the greatest failure of my personal one. I thought of Leo's letter, a small, hopeful seed planted in the scorched earth of our family. I thought of my parents' empty eyes and my sister's burning hatred. I had saved strangers at the cost of my own blood. Was it worth it? Later that evening, I sat alone in my apartment, the metal box on the table in front of me. I didn't open it. I knew what was inside. My phone rang. It was Anya. "Just checking in," she said. "Heard about today. Congratulations. You earned it." "Thanks, Anya," I said. "Means a lot coming from you." "Get some rest, Mason," she said softly before hanging up. The conversation was short, but it was a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone. I had a different kind of family now, a family bound not by blood, but by shared secrets and a common, heavy purpose. I looked out the window at the sprawling city below, a tapestry of lights, each one a life, a story. They were safe. They were oblivious. And that was the whole point. Director Evans had said something to me after the ceremony, a final thought before he left. "Integrity," he'd said, "means doing the right thing, especially when it costs you everything." He was right. It had cost me everything. My family, my past, a part of my soul. But as I looked at that city, I knew, with a certainty that was both a comfort and a curse, that I hadn't just done the right thing. I had done the only thing I could. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's a heavy story to tell, and it means a lot that you stayed to the end. Have you ever been caught between doing what's right and what's easy, especially when family is involved? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Your support truly makes a difference.